My name is Hilda, and I'm 60 years old. What I'm going to tell you will transform the way you see your family forever. My daughter-in-law Melissa and my son Damien attacked me and my husband Henry and threw us off a cliff that was 90 feet high. This happened only 3 days ago. I was lying there, hurt and bleeding, when I heard Henry scream, "Hilda, don't move!" At that moment, I felt an agony that was worse than anything I had ever felt before. But that wasn't the worst part of the experience. After that, things became even worse when Henry told the mother the most horrible truth that could ever be told to a mother. A puzzle that had been kept secret for 25 years. Henry and I thought we had made the perfect family for more than 4 decades, and we thought other people felt the same way. We would wake up every morning in our cozy suburban home, where the smell of fresh coffee filled the air and the sound of birds singing outside served as our soundtrack for the day. I worked as a teacher at the primary school in my area. I would share stories about my pupils and the latest pranks they had pulled as soon as I got home from school every day. Henry had a woodworking shop where he made furniture that was more beautiful than anything else. His hands were rough from years of work, but he could turn the simplest piece of wood into a work of art with his hands. Richard, our first child, was 5 years older than Damien. We had 2 kids together. Richard was the heart and soul of the home. He was always happy to help Henry in the workshop, make me laugh and keep me safe from harm. I loved Damien just as much, even though he was quieter and more in control of himself. I assumed that as a mother you never had favorites. Henry built our oak table with his own 2 hands. Every Sunday after church, the whole family would join together around it to talk and spend time together. Richard would tell us about his aspirations and dreams of getting a degree in engineering, but Damien wouldn't say anything and would just sit there poking at his food with his fork. Life seemed easy and boring, but it looked great. Henry and I would walk around the trail that went around our small town in the evenings. We would spend time together dreaming about what would happen in the future. We would picture how we would spend our retirement years in the same place where we had built our life and how we would see our grandkids grow up. I never thought that the peaceful walks I was taking were getting me ready for the one that almost cost me my life. I would get together with my family every Saturday and Sunday. My 2 sisters, Harriet and Irene, would come with their spouses and kids. The kids would run around the house while the men worked in the yard, and the women would speak and giggle in the kitchen. Henry was the best company I could have wished for. He kept going for walks after work and bringing me wildflowers he had picked up along the way for 40 years after we got married. While he worked in his shop, I would hold pieces of wood for him, and in return, he would help me grade the tests my students had taken. I thought we were an unstoppable collection of people working together, or at least that's what I thought at the time. We would sit on the porch at night, look up at the sky, and talk about what we wanted to do next. After we retired, we talked about the idea of traveling, seeing the ocean for the first time, and building a smaller house after our kids had their own families. We thought that the happiness we were feeling was real and that it would last forever. Still, it wasn't until much later in life that I learned that sometimes people pretend to be completely happy to hide the worst calamities. When Richard turned 20, something bad happened in our family. He started arguing with Damien about things I didn't really grasp. As soon as I stepped in, they would stop talking. I could hear their voices echoing as they talked to each other in the corridor. Henry tried to calm my worries by explaining that it was just brother stuff, and that it would go away eventually. I wanted to believe him because I wanted to believe that my family was still doing well. And then, on a night in October, exactly 25 years ago from today, Richard didn't show up for supper at his house as he had said he would. We waited patiently for the clock to hit 11, and then we kept waiting until it was beyond midnight. We waited till the clock said it was after 1 in the morning. Damien seemed like he was busy with studies, but he was really hiding out in his room. When I asked him about Richard, I observed a peculiar look in his eyes. Henry and his neighbors went out to look for Richard. They looked at every part of town and every path that Richard liked to walk. They found Richard's body in the bottom of a river valley before the sun came up. I never doubted what the police said about him falling in the dark, but they said it was an accident. How would I go about doing that? I would finally realize that the truth of the situation was much scarier than anything I could have imagined. The day I went to Richard's funeral was the saddest day of my life. I chose to wear the one black dress I own, which just so happened to be the one I wore during my mother's funeral. Damien was being very calm and almost dispassionate, which was surprising since he had recently lost his older brother. Damien didn't say a word the whole time I was crying till I couldn't cry anymore. He kept a neutral expression, and only now do I see how serious the warning in his silence was. He was always there for me and helped me whenever my legs gave out. He would whisper words of comfort, but when he looked back on them, they tasted sour on his tongue. After Richard died, Damien changed in some way. He tried to be more caring and attentive to make up for something he couldn't even admit to himself. He would give me stuff to make me feel better when he sensed that I was sad. He would go to the workshop with his father and help me with my responsibilities around the house. I thought that was just his way of dealing with Richard's death and filling the void that had been left behind. I was very naive. What he was really doing was making the perfect mask to disguise the monster that was really Damien. We learned how to deal with it, even though the wound never totally healed, even after years. Damien and Melissa, a nice young woman from the town next door, got married. They both looked really happy. Because they had 2 kids, it felt like life was giving us a second chance for the first time in a long time. Melissa nicknamed me Mom, and helped me with a lot of things around the house when she was here. Damien started working with wood when his father died. He even started his own business in the field. It looked like everything was back to normal. As I was thrown to the bottom of the gorge, breaking my ribs and leaving me with blood in my mouth, I realized that all of that bliss was just a well-planned deception. Henry and I decided that it was time to change our will. About 6 months before that point in time, the first indicators that anything was wrong were seen. By putting away whatever we could, we had saved up a lot of money over the years. In total, we had about $200,000 in our bank accounts, the house we owned, and the land I got from my parents. Damien told us to talk to a lawyer. "It's important to have everything in order," he said with a smile that I recognized. "Melissa, mother, father, all of you are 60 years old now." At the time, this smile made me feel better, but not today. As she talked, her fingers brushed against mine in a soft way. "We love you so much, and we want to make sure you're safe." Melissa nodded in agreement next to him. Those words were so nice back then, but now they make me sick to my stomach. It was completely crazy to place that much faith in them. We went to meet Albert, an older man we had known for a long time. He was the lawyer. He talked to us about our options, which included setting up a trust, giving away the inheritance, or just writing a regular will. Damien said that he and Melissa should be named as our only heirs, and that they would be in charge of giving the money to the grandkids. In addition, he commented with a smile that now appeared to have malicious intentions, "When you are older, you will need us. It's better for us to have access to the resources to take care of you properly," he continued to explain. I was uncomfortable with the manner in which he had said that, but Henry appeared to be persuaded by his comments. My husband, who had always been more trusting than I was, did not put up much of a fight when we decided to go through with the plan. I had a dubious attitude, especially at the beginning, because I remembered how Richard had frequently mentioned that he would provide us with financial assistance once we were older. Richard, on the other hand, had already passed away by this point, which meant that Damien was the only living son that we had left. The papers was signed by us in the afternoon on Tuesday during the day. Melissa offered me a great embrace while sporting her gorgeous green outfit, which I remember clearly. This happened after the ceremony had over. She whispered into my ear, "From this day forward, we are officially one family together for all eternity." Even though I was unable to understand the rationale at that moment, the words that she spoke caused a shudder to go down my spine. I noted that Damien shook Henry's hand, and I also noticed that his grin was not genuine. Additionally, his eyes had a cold, faraway quality to them that I couldn't quite make sense of. There was a growing trend toward uncommonness in the weeks that followed. The number of times that Damien and Melissa visited grew, but the manner in which these encounters transpired was unlike how they had been in the past. After a certain period of time had passed, they ceased visiting us for the purpose of spending time with us. Instead of doing that, They provided us with continual advice concerning ways in which we can improve our home, the kinds of investments that we should make, and the types of life insurance policies that we should obtain. Melissa approached her mother one day and said, "Mother, you should think about selling this enormous house and moving to a smaller place. We could help you find a comfortable apartment in town." But I was quite fond of our house. Every area of it contained a memory, a fragment of our lives. This house was our home. It was the kitchen where I had prepared countless of meals, the workshop where Henry had made his masterpieces, and the yard where our children had played. I am unable to envision myself living my life in any other place. When I told Damien this, I noticed a flicker of displeasure in his eyes, and it sent a chill straight through my bones. In a voice that I had never heard him use before, he remarked, "Mother, you are acting irrationally. This house is larger than two persons your age would need." Melissa started by nodding her head vigorously and saying, "What's more, the cost of upkeep must be out of this world. If you fell down the stairs or something else happened, there is no way we could get to you in time." She went on to say that you would be making a much more logical decision if you sold your home and moved to a place that is more appropriate for your age at this time, when the property market is strong. Henry, who had always been a reasonable guy, started to really think about the thoughts they had shared. That being said, I couldn't shake the sensation that this stress came from something far bigger. After another talk about what the future holds for us, I asked Henry whether he thought it was odd that Damien had been so interested in our money problems lately. "Hilda, all he cares about is us," Henry said to her while he cleaned his teeth. "Maybe we should think about his suggestions," I replied. "We're not as young as we used to be," but I could see a hint of doubt in Henry's eyes, which he didn't want to admit. I now know that he already had doubts. He had already started to put the pieces together before I even knew it. When Damien asked us to give him power of attorney over our money, things got worse. "It's just a precaution," he said while Melissa was in our kitchen preparing tea like she owned the place. "If you happen to get sick or have a health problem," he said in a way that made me almost believe him, "we can handle your affairs without any legal problems." I felt uneasy, and his insistence was the reason for my uneasiness. That night I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep because I was staring at the ceiling and listening to Henry's steady breathing. I was trying to figure out what was making me so anxious. The next day, I called my sister Harriet to seek for her advice. I've always been less aware of things than Harriet and have never been as suspicious of other people's motives. She didn't say anything for a long time after I told her how much pressure Damien was under. She spoke slowly and said, "Hilda, doesn't it seem strange that Damien is so eager to take charge of your money? I'm talking about the fact that he owns his own business. Right now he is doing well with money. Why would he need that much power over your money?" What she said made me feel like I had been slapped. Her judgment was correct. Damien had never shown any signs that he needed help with money. In the past, he had never begged for aid or borrowed money. I was going to confront Damien when he came by to chat to me again that afternoon. I asked my son, "Why is it so important for you to be in charge of our money? Your father and I are still able to think clearly." His reaction was not only quick but also very telling. He adopted a stern look on his face, and for a brief moment I saw something in his eyes that filled me with dread, something cold, calculating, and menacing. He made a comment with an air of tension. "It's not a matter of control, Mother. It is about love, care, and family responsibility," he continued, but the way he stressed the words family responsibility made it sound more like a threat than a statement of affection. At that point, Melissa, who had been maintaining her silence, spoke up with her kind yet resolute voice. "Hilda," she added, "all we want for you is what is in your best interests." That night, after they left, Henry and I had our first big fight in years because he was worried about things we could have easily worked out. He thought I was being too suspicious and seeking for things that weren't there. I was aware, on the other hand, that something didn't feel right. "Do you remember what Damien was like before Richard died?" "He wasn't the same person he was then," Henry said. "He used to be different. He kept to himself more, and I don't know how else to say it, but there was something about him that scared me." Henry stopped what he was doing and looked at me strangely. Henry proceeded to explain in a calm voice. Hilda, there are some things about Richard's death that I have never told you. My heart started to race as Henry gazed at me with sad eyes. What happened to Richard after he died? My voice shook as I spoke. Heating was bothering me. He had been acting in a strange way, more hostile and resentful. You followed him? I asked. What? It was hard to believe what I was hearing. It was almost like he had something to hide. I stayed still, unable to move as the words sank in, but the reality of the situation still felt like a distant reality that I couldn't accept. Henry kept talking while he slowly bobbed his head. His face looked like it was focused on something far away. I had to, Hilda. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I saw them as soon as I got to the gorge. They were arguing on the edge of the cliff. Damien and Richard. Richard was holding some papers in front of Damien, and I could hear Richard yelling, Damien, you have been taking things from us. You've been stealing money from the family. The word, the, is used before a noun or noun phrase that relates to anything that has already been said or is already known to the person being talked to. Can you tell me what Damien said? Yes. The words were still ringing in my ears, and I drew in a deep breath. Henry looked at me with a look that made it clear he was feeling guilty. Of course he denied it. He said Richard was making up the facts. But Hilda, I saw the two of them fighting. At that point, as the fight was getting worse, Richard said. He lost his balance, and his voice shook. As the truth slowly became clear to me, the world began to spin around me. I saw him fall to the ground. I saw him fall into the gorge, I said. I whispered. You saw him attack Richard, didn't you? I was almost scared of the answer. His face twisted in pain, and Henry closed his eyes firmly. No, Hilda. Damien didn't push him on purpose. I know that wasn't the case. He was very mad. Henry's voice broke as he said, Damien wanted the inheritance, Hilda. Richard's accusations were too much for him to handle. He wanted everything, and Richard was in his way. I couldn't breathe. You saw everything, didn't you? You saw everything, didn't you? I heard them arguing and I knew it was bad. As the words came out of my mouth, my voice came out in a scratchy whisper. The air was thick and heavy. I asked. When I eventually got to the edge of the gorge, it was already too late. Richard was gone. And Damien too. Damien's face was covered with tears. He was shaking. He continued saying, It was an accident, Dad. I didn't mean to push him, I assured Hilda, and she believed me. I trusted him because he was my son. But now I know what the truth is. He had been stealing from us for a few months. Richard knew that. Henry had helped hide the fact that Damien had slain Richard to get some money. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my heart breaking into 1,000 tiny pieces when the last pieces fell into place. How could you have kept that from me for so long? He yelled. The feeling of betrayal was rising up inside of me like a fire. Henry twisted his lips into an unpleasant expression as he said, I couldn't, Hilda. I was unable to do something that might break up our family. I assumed that if I pretended that everything was fine and said nothing, Damien would decide to change. Perhaps he would come to realize how misguided his actions were. However, I was in error. I should have informed you, he said. His voice tinged with remorse. It was clear that he was carrying the burden of his own guilt. Did he ever repay the money? I remarked, my voice shaking. I couldn't understand how Dad could have kept such a horrible secret from me. No, Henry said quietly. Dad said he would do it, but he never did. He stole, and I acted like I didn't see it and didn't know about it. I played the part of Hilda, his partner in crime. Every time I stayed quiet and ignored the missing money, I was helping him hide his crime. I could feel like the walls of our world were closing in on me. So all of these years, everything. It has been a lie, Henry continued. I didn't want to believe it either, Hilda, and tears were streaming down his face. Damien has been lying to us, and we have been lying to ourselves. But now I get it. And I see the man he has become. I was sitting there in a fog, not able to absorb what Henry had just told me. It felt like a cold knife stabbing me in the chest when I felt betrayed. My husband and my son killed my firstborn son, Richard, jointly. Then they worked together to hide the crime. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it seemed. I started to see why everything was happening. The strange tension between Richard and Damien, the fact that Damien had suddenly become so helpful after Richard died, and the way things had been slowly shifting in our family. I now know that Damien has been playing with us the whole time. He had been pretending to be the loving son and brother for all those years, hiding the truth. But why now? Why was he striving so hard to take charge of our money? Even though I tried to ignore the idea, I was sure that all of this was part of a bigger plan. Damien didn't only want money. He wanted to finish what he had started 25 years ago. We agreed to change our will, and that's when everything started to fall into place. Damien had been pushing us to change everything so that he and Melissa could take full control of our estate. At first, I thought he was only trying to protect us, but after hearing Henry's story, I know that he was planning his next move all along. He had been looking forward to this moment, when we would give him everything and he could take it all away. He wouldn't help us once we were older. Damien, on the other hand, was set on finishing what he had started. He would do anything to get everything that was rightfully his. I felt sick to my stomach as I thought about how they had been putting pressure on us while also hiding their real reasons for doing so. It wasn't only about money. It was also about having power. And now they were planning our deaths so that everything would work out. It turned out that the hike that Damien suggested we do was exactly what we needed. The mountains were all there was. That was where they were going to kill us. It became evident to me later, but I didn't see it at the time. The family outing wasn't meant to bring the family closer together. It was a plan to kill us and make it look like an accident. They had lied to us and made us think we could trust them, so everything felt like a trap. The fear that was eating away at me wouldn't go away. Henry and I, on the other hand, had a plan. No matter what occurred, we were going to make it through. We had to do it. Henry told Hilda, "We have to get through this. We have to stay alive. For Richard, for us, and for the truth." I promised him that we would. We would figure out a way to get out of this awful circumstance. During the days that followed, fear and lying were the norm. Henry and I tried our best to stay calm and act like we weren't panicking when Damien and Melissa came to visit. We were hiding the fear we felt all the time. They were really looking forward to the vacation that was coming up. They chatted about how great it would be for everyone in the family to go trekking in the mountains together for a whole day. They were too sure of themselves and too sure that their plan would work. They had no idea that we knew they were there. It was incredibly frustrating to pretend that everything was fine when all I wanted to do was yell at them to let them know we knew what they were planned and that we had to wait. We have to do our jobs perfectly. Every smile they gave us and every phrase they spoke that sounded innocent made me feel like I was about to throw up. The night before we went hiking, we didn't get much sleep. I lay awake and listened to Henry's faint breaths as I stared at the ceiling. Even though he tried to be calm, I could tell he was stressed out while we talked. We both knew what was going to happen. We both knew that this could be the last night we spent in our house, which had once been a symbol of our family's love and happiness. Even though the house was full of memories, it felt empty. Now it seemed like every corner was mocking us, reminding us of how much we had lost. Henry used to talk in a low voice at one point. "Hilda, we will make it happen. We have to do it." Even though he sounded sure of himself, I could see he was just as scared as I was. He said, "We can't let them win." At that moment, we were fighting to stay alive instead of just being protected. Damien and Melissa showed up early in the morning to start the excursion. As we opened the door to greet them, I forced myself to smile, trying to hide the fear that was eating away at me from the inside. Damien was already whistling a happy little song while Melissa carried a shopping bag with food for the trip. She smiled at us like nothing was wrong, like everything was normal. "We brought some snacks for the trip," she said with a smile so wide that it made me shiver. She raised the bag with a smile, and her eyes sparkled with false excitement. Cookies, water, fruit. Everything you'll need for a perfect family day." I nodded in agreement as I looked at the things Mom had packed, even though my stomach was starting to hurt. One of those things may be used to hide the fact that we killed someone. Their plan included every drink and every food item. The excitement was so strong that I could almost hear the clock's hands moving, counting down the seconds till we had to jump from that cliff. I had no idea how they would do it, but I knew it would happen. While we were all getting into the car, I heard Damien and Melissa discuss about the path we would take. Damien said softly, "Everything is going to turn out great," as he gazed at us in the rearview mirror. "The road has some really beautiful sights. You will absolutely love it," he continued, keeping his voice too calm and too rehearsed. I could tell that he was pretending to be a caring family member and a loving son. But I could also see another feeling in his eyes. If he cared about his parents, he wouldn't have treated them that way. He seemed like a man who had already made up his mind about what to do. He had already decided that he would do whatever it took to get what was rightfully his. He had the money, the house, and the inheritance in his hands. It was all his. The only thing that kept him from reaching his goal was getting rid of the obstacles in his way. Henry held my hand tightly, and I could feel his fingers shaking. I wanted to reassure him and let him know that we would get through this, but the fact is that I wasn't sure we would. Felt like forever to get up into the mountains. It went on for 2 hours. Damien drove very carefully, following all speed limits and stopping completely at every stop sign, as if nothing was wrong. As we drove along the winding roads, I could feel the tension in the air, which was heavy and oppressive. Felt like every second was a whole life. Every word that came out of Damien and Melissa's mouths seemed to be another layer of lies, each one aimed to hide what they really wanted. Melissa smiled and pointed out the window as we drove by a field of wildflowers. "Look at those flowers. Don't they take your breath away?" she yelled, her voice dripping with fake delight. When I looked at her, all I could see was that she was wearing a mask. The smile on her face didn't show in her eyes. I knew for sure that she was exactly how I thought she was, and that scared the hell out of me. I felt a terrible feeling in my gut as soon as we got to the trailhead. It was hard to realize how gorgeous the place was. The tall trees, the cool mountain air, and the sound of a river nearby made everything look like it would be a great place for a family vacation. I think, on the other hand, that it was the best area for me to do my implementation. This is where all of the events would happen. The text that was generated is not allowed by our content filters. As they pulled their backpacks off their shoulders, both Melissa and Damien showed an unsettling level of skill. Damien started checking the gear to make sure everything was operating before he even opened the door. When I saw him take ropes and harnesses out of his backpack, I was filled with fear. These weren't merely put in place for safety reasons. They were made to kill us. I could feel Henry's hold on my hand getting tighter and tighter. We were at the edge of our own doom, and there was no way to get away. I was so scared that I was about to freeze up completely, but I made myself do what I usually do. I had to keep them from knowing that I knew what they were up to. I was scared, but I had to keep them from knowing how scared I was. Damien wore the same smile when he was pretending to be the perfect son all those years ago as he did when he turned to me and gave me one. It was a smile that made his face look happy. "Are you ready, Mom?" I said. "Let's go for a walk in the woods," trying to keep my voice steady. I was going crazy inside and wanted to go right away. I thought I needed to ask for help. But I couldn't do that. We had to keep playing. He asked in a voice that was calm and well-rehearsed. My lips shook a little when I smiled, which didn't come easy to me. I took a deep breath and responded, "Of course." I made an effort to pay attention to the trail, the scenery, and everything else that could help me recall where I was as we started hiking. I was well aware that I needed to stay alive. I was forced to endure this. However, all I could think about was what was waiting for us at the end of the trail. The cliff, the fall, and the unavoidable push. As we continued to ascend, the trail became increasingly steep, and I could feel my legs becoming more and more fatigued with every step. Henry was also having a tougher time breathing at this point and was finding it difficult to keep up. Damien and Melissa were aware of the fact that we were older and slower. There was a valid explanation for why they had selected this particular path. They were aware that we would not be able to keep up with them, and they were aware that we would be at a disadvantage when the time came for them to make their move. Despite the panic that was pounding in my chest, I grabbed onto the one thing that kept me going: the hope that we could make it out alive. We were not going to allow them emerge victorious. This time it will not happen.